If TJ Hargrove was publicly identified as the initial lead investigator, is TJ still assigned? Was the K3 assigned? Who is actually working the case now? The Roni Reaves case. Let's get into it. When new media eventually brought names out like Will, Christian, and Jordan, people got upset. People flooded my inbox. People flooded my comments defending them. But here's the part that people were missing. I just didn't pull their names out of thin air. This 2022 Baldwin Bulletin article discusses students being vetted, phones being searched, trucks being checked, and people being cleared. Now think about it. The shooting happened in 2017, right? So it took 4 years just for the public to get those details about what investigators were doing early on in the case. And even before this article came out, rumors and whispers about these names had already been circulating in Milledgeville for years, especially within the Black community, right? Not because new media created the rumors, not because Facebook created the rumors, but because the case became so locked down and so tight-lipped under pending investigation that people start filling in the blanks themselves. And understand this, everybody in Milledgeville does not move in the same circles. There are racial divides, there's cultural divides, there's economic divides, different sides of town, different conversations happen in different places, right? What's being whispered around Lake St. Clair may never reach West End. What's being discussed in Harrisburg may never make it to country club conversations. So over time, fragments of stories travel without context. Rumors grow, urban legends form. And because the sheriff's department never publicly laid things out clearly, people were left trying to connect the dots on their own. Now let me be clear again, right? My goal was never to convict Will, Jordan, or Christian, or anybody else for that matter. Matter of fact, when their names finally came out publicly, people connected to the situation basically confirmed exactly what the 2022 reporting already suggested, that these guys were vetted and cleared years ago. And Will's fiance herself came into the comments saying the truck's motor had blew up and that he had been cleared almost a decade ago. And guess what? That lines right up with the reporting, right? Christian's name had already been tied to the student write-up and warrant discussion years ago through public narratives surrounding the case. And based on this write-up, it's clearly Christian is the student they're talking about in the previous article. Then there's another name that starts repeatedly hitting my inbox over and over again through community hearsay. Billy Joe Reddick. Allegedly, he was the guy that arrived 6 minutes after Ronnie dialed 911, who was unfortunately passed away since this incident occurred. Now, is that confirmed officially? No. And that's exactly the point I'm making. People are left operating off rumors, screenshots, whispers, inboxes, and hearsay because the case has remained so sealed off from almost a decade. And eventually, new media got tired of the rumors. That's why in January 2026, we started filing open records requests. Not because we thought we solved the case, not because we wanted to embarrass anybody, but because after nearly 10 years, people naturally wanted to know, what is the investigative posture now? Because according to local reporting, Will was vetted, Christian was vetted, Jordan names resurfaced, alibis were checked, phone was searched, trucks were examined. Okay, fair enough. Then what happened after that? Then we start getting open records responses saying pending investigation. So I ask again, outside of general assertion that matter remain pending, I'm seeking confirmation as to whether Baldwin County Sheriff's Office possesses any records sufficient to show active investigative activity related to the death of Roni Reaves within a reasonable recent period. And then Major Brad King verbally confirms investigative activity supposedly occurred within the previous 60 days. Okay, all right. But people also remember that Brad King's public statements over the years has created confusion too. At one point, reportedly stated Roni didn't give a description of the vehicle. But the incident report itself appears to say she described the vehicle as possibly a white truck behind her before the shooting. And later, there's a discussion about a white truck arriving 6 minutes after Roni dialed 911. Okay, which white truck are we talking about? We talking about the one that's behind her shooting or the one alleged coming after 6 minutes after she dialed 911? Then another public statement discussing a firearm tied to another possible crime. Okay, what came out of this lead? Because you said, and new evidence discovered by investigators on Monday related to the firearm used to kill Reaves may link her death to another Baldwin County crime. And this is his quote. I will go as far as to tell you that it is in reference to a different crime, but we have a lead that we're exploring right now that might actually connect the two. So what happened to this? Then another question comes up, right? If TJ Hargrove was publicly identified as the initial lead investigator, why is Brad King now the one verbally confirming investigative posture nearly 10 years later? Is TJ still assigned? Was the case 3 assigned? Who is actually working the case now? When new media asks for records sufficient to demonstrate investigative activity, the answer came back, those records are exempt too. So now, there's no independent way for the public to even see whether meaningful investigative continuity still exists beyond generalized statements. And this is where the Maryland Appellate Court order comes into play. Because in this case, they have ruled that Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services cannot use a generalized, vague statement of open investigation. This just came down yesterday. One of the judges even wrote, DPSCS failed to show that disclosure of the video would cause a specific harm, right? Its concerns regarding interference with law enforcement were too generalized. Now think about this. If investigators publicly came out years ago and simply said, yeah, we vetted Will, we vetted Christian, we vetted Jordan, right? We vetted these individuals, right? Yes, we searched their phones. Yes, we checked their alibis. Yes, we examined their truck. Yes, they were clear. Then maybe their names wouldn't still be floating around almost a decade later. That's my point. Because silence doesn't always stop rumors. Sometimes silence feeds rumors. And this doesn't just hurt Roni's family, it hurts everybody connected to the case. It hurts the family looking for answers, and it hurts families publicly trying to understand. And yes, it can even hurt the people who were reportedly investigated and cleared years ago, because whispers never die when there's no closure. Now add on top of all of that, there's no publicly known suspect, no indictment, no court order blocking the tape, and the actual open records response rely almost entirely on generalized pending investigation language. That dying declaration language that Sheriff Massey keep hollering about, it's nowhere in the open records response. They are solely leaning on OCGA 50-18, right? And this is why, for almost a decade, the public is still piecing together rumors, media reports, old newspaper articles, screenshots, community gossip, and speculation because the case remains so tightly sealed. But rumors grow in darkness. Transparency kills rumors. Because after nearly 10 years, people naturally are still asking, what exactly is the investigative posture today? Be great today. Peace.